On.
I know yesterday quite a bit of conversation here on the ACC, Florida State. That August 15th deadline came and went, and all the discussion there. You had Matt Baker on. This is a part of an article on ESPN.com by Andrea Adelson. Schools have privately questioned the brand and marketability data that Florida State has touted, including its assertion that if the conference revenues were removed, the Seminoles would rank number 3 in the SEC and Big Ten in revenue generated. Matt Brown is going to join us here in about 10 minutes on that. Said I would also question the data. We'll have him on the show here in about 15 minutes.
I'll tell you who else questions the data. Me, who gets letters from them saying, here's how little money we had forever all the time, and join the Alumni Association at a higher level and all of these things. So, yeah, I'm kind of surprised because when you hear this now, compared to what I heard 5 years ago, when this is why they had to fire Willie Taggart when they did, even though they're going to take a huge loss in money. They don't have this kind of money. They don't have these kind of donors. They don't have this. They don't have that. And then all of a sudden, you get to the point of where you realize that you're going to be $40 million behind your biggest rival in revenue every year. And then you say, well, no, we have this kind of money. We just don't have that kind of money. It's weird. And accounting for these schools gets different all the time. I do think that they, as far as, I don't know about revenue, I know output when it comes to football, they spend a lot of that money on football. That's for sure. But as far as revenue generating, I don't know if they're going to be up there with, say, if they were number 3 or number 4 in the SEC, they're up there with Bama and Georgia and Tennessee and places like that. And I don't know if that's necessarily the case.
Well, maybe they got the same advice and input from the people who were talking with some of the Pac-12 schools. Did you guys see that story right before we went on air from Brett McMurphy?
No.
On the Pac-12's demise. It's actually from Brady McCullough, so give him the credit, actually. But McMurphy passed it along. George Kliavkoff tried blocking UCLA's move to the Big Ten with Cal Regents. Then in October 22, ESPN offered Pac-12 $30 million a school. And so we all know this, right? But what was their target date? Remember what they said they thought they were worth? $50 million, right? So October 22, ESPN offers Pac $30 million a school. But here's the interesting part. But a Pac-12 president worked with a professor on his campus who estimated the school's market value was $50 million a school. So the Pac-12, based on this professor's advice, asked for $50 million per school, and ESPN said no. So that's some filling in of the blanks of, like, where did that number come from? Some professor on a Pac-12 campus working with a Pac-12 president, and that's where the $50 million apparently came from. And ESPN said no to that, and we know the rest is history, and they're not quite history yet, but that's a humorous little addition to the whole saga and where some of these numbers came from. So, yeah, maybe Florida State's getting their advice from the same professor who's telling them they're worth about $20 million more than they're worth or what have you.
Do you remember when, and I did not see that before we went on the air, when A&M decided to leave? Who was it who was the data guy that said, oh, my God, the state of Texas is going to lose hundreds of millions of dollars?
Yeah.
He did surveys and estimated the kind of money, financial loss it would be, and none of that really ever came about.
What he didn't account for was that, because it was one of those things like the state of Texas is going to lose this money. I'm like, well, they're not moving College Station, Texas to Louisiana. It's still going to be in the borders of the Lone Star State. Plus now, again, if you lived in Austin or an A&M fan, or what, I've never once, and I have family down there. I've gone to many A&M games. I've never stayed overnight after one. I've come right back here. But if I lived in Baton Rouge,
right,
I damn well have to, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so those are the things that he didn't account for. I have a theory on FSU. I think that they've gotten some of the right data of, like, okay, they are doing this, but I do think that they're having the realization recently that they spent a decade squandering their lead that they had. In that, 2013, you're the national champs in the last BCS game. 2014, you're in the playoff the first time. You had a good runway heading into the modern era of college football, and you burned it away. Yep. And now they're trying to make up for all that, and maybe it'll work. And
they're frisky because they last year 10 wins, and this year they're one of the teams thought to be a national championship caliber program. Baylor plays Utah in week